I have to be able to hear myself as well. So, good morning, Vincent. I'm in charge of this presentation this morning in this room. So we're going to be talking about the acceleration of renewables, because it's become clear over the last few years, for people who are managing the networks as well as for the people from the government, that we have to accelerate renewables. Otherwise, we won't be able to meet the needs and have sufficient electrical energy to shift to the 2030 situation. We have, in the next 15 years, we have to build more nuclear. The nuclear plants are getting older and need renewals, and we also need to accelerate the other renewables for heating, for transport, because as you've realized, we have a problem of climate change. The temperatures are rising, and whatever the oil-producing countries might say about it, it won't otherwise be possible to meet the needs. So this morning, we're going to be talking about the acceleration and the law which came in March, the acceleration of renewable energies. We're going to be looking at all this, updating the situation, and look at how things are actually working in the field. So we have 5 experts who are going to be speaking. So Jean-claude, who is opposite here, Jean-claude, who is the mayor of Luc-sur-Aude and vice president of the Association of Rural Mayors in the Aude, which is a kind of association. Julie FERRY, who's the only woman on the panel this morning, unfortunately, and she is the deputy head of the energy division of the association AMORCE. To her right, we have François VERSINI-CAMPINCHI, who is a lawyer working for LPA CGR. To his right, we have Xavier DAVAL, vice president of the Syndicate of Renewable Energies, and finally Daniel OUSTRAIN, who is a territorial consultation officer for TOTALENERGIES. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to be starting now with you, François VERSINI, because ever since March, with this law on accelerating renewables, the law hasn't come into force because there are certain texts have to be introduced as well in terms of application of the rules. Could you just speak a bit closer to the mic? Good morning. Thank you, Vincent. Yes, this law, which came out in March, it's in the process of bringing out the decrees in terms of application. In terms of the other sections of the law, we have the agrivoltaic side and the solar side, which are the main sources of energy concerned by this law. We'll be talking about wind turbines as well, which are less concerned by this law. The texts are being prepared at the moment. The council is going to be meeting during December. Modulo is something which I'm not absolutely sure about. Will there be a public consultation process? I'm not sure about this before publication, particularly on the agri-PV side. Yes, Richard Lavalier, the general delegate EnerPlan, said that it is something which might happen. So I think it'll probably take about 6 months. No, not necessarily 6 months, but I think it'll be, things will be really starting to happen in January rather than December. So this is going to concern wind turbines, not just the project committees. The text related to solarizing the car parks for buildings. So all these texts are in process at the moment. For the time being, we're not at the application stage. But it's true, the acceleration process has been launched. Thank you very much. So in terms of the acceleration zones, Julie FERRY, what does this actually refer to? All renewables are concerned by this zone, I would imagine? Yes, good morning, everybody. Well, yes, in fact, these acceleration zones are areas which are intended to receive installations for renewables. And this is the description in the law. And The particularity of these zones is that they have to be identified on a communal scale. And so this means that these are zones that have to meet the objectives in the multi-annual energy program. So if we could have the slides, please. Yes, it's true that there are one or two slides that we have to illustrate the point. So it's in reverse here, but that doesn't matter. No, this is a live program, a live session. So what the ministry is saying is that these are zones that have to show the political will of the communes or the authorities to set up the installations in one area rather than another. And as François VERSINI was saying, these are zones which concern all the renewables in every sector, not simply electrical renewables. Biogas with methanization, as well as renewable heating, with geothermal, geomass, and also making sure that we can recuperate heat loss as well. So this is something which is often overlooked. Thank you very much. Not all communes have to create these zones of acceleration. It's not an obligation according to the law. The law doesn't oblige people. It's not compulsory, but they're clearly encouraged to do so. These aren't zones which have a proven feasibility, but rather they're interesting in terms of opportunity. It's important to remember this. Often we tell our members, who are often concerned about this aspect, and this is according to the law. It's more a question of opportunities. So what's the timeline on this? Is this is very ambitious? It's a tight timeline. Perhaps you could remind us what's planned according to the government. Yes, it's very ambitious. With the law that came out on the 10th of May, 2023, we had 2 months to make the data available. So we're running a little bit late already on this timeline. So then the communes had 6 months to identify the acceleration zones as of the time when they received the data. So this was there's a joint consultation phase as well, with discussion as an association representing the municipalities. We realized that it wasn't pragmatic and it was somewhat unrealistic as a process, but with the beta version of the information, when this came out, the new deadline date was the 31st of December 2023, but presented by the GGEC as an objective date. So you've already taken the security measures, I can see here. So what is the advantage of having an acceleration zone? I'm asking you this question, but any of you obviously can answer any of these questions to add in any extra information. So these acceleration areas, renewable acceleration areas, it's important to remind you, I think these areas are going to basically be related to wind turbines with ground devices on the ground. And since 2013, oh yes, can you just tell us, so these were areas for a wind turbine installation with the obligation to buy. In 2013, this process was stopped because of the disputes which came about after the annulation of these. So these disputes were attacked the areas, so there were prefectural decrees which came into play as well as part of this in relation to the areas that were defined for wind turbines. Since 2013 and the Brot law, these areas were deleted. and every year, every 2 years, there are amendments made to the energy laws. And so indirectly, the process continued with these areas. It was the intercommunes or the municipalities which were involved in the process as well, in joint consultation with information from the prefecture. And so this was the way we had this bottom-up planning process, essentially focused on wind turbines. To answer your question in terms of the advantage, the law is intended to be positive, to accelerate these areas in terms of what can be done in these areas and not elsewhere. In terms of the legal side, it was important to be able to reduce the period of public inquiry. This gave us an extra month. We gained a month, dropping down from 4 to 3 months. This period could go up to 2 years, but it's not a constraint to have an extra month in terms of the timeline, in terms of the deadline, was a positive thing. A couple of weeks could make a difference. Particularly when we're talking about wind turbines in big wind farm areas, for example, the law was able to give advantageous tariff rates for off-peak hours, for example. So for the major farms, so it's positive in the sense that the advantages. You're being a bit too overcautious here, I think. I think the principle of the acceleration area is to have bottom-up movement, and this is the way it's seen. And we always find the same subject, but this is part of the debate, that the state delegates to the municipalities to be part of the energy policy. But it's absolutely essential that the municipalities take advantage of this opportunity. So maybe this is a bit of a bad joke, but the idea is to improve the acceptability of these projects. We can imagine that the projects will be accepted because it's the previous joint consultation. There are two issues here. First of all, the project has to be authorized by the prefect, and there's a lot of refusal, in fact, that takes place, which we're seeing. The wind turbine authorizations really tend to get stuck in terms of legislation, and then there's the acceptability by the local community. They have to be unanimous. Certain departments are at 100% of dispute and refusal. I'm not sure that the acceleration area process is going to have any effect on this, but it's important to be able to finance a participatory funding as well to accept. And this also helps to improve the acceptability. I see you are shaking your head. Do you have something that you'd like to add here? The real benefit of these acceleration areas is the only one, is the name. And that's it. But at least we're in the process of getting the idea across, that France is going to accelerate. So let's hope that that's going to have an effect. As far as the rest of the law is concerned, I don't think that makes much difference. So it's marginal, but necessary to get across this energy transition point. So it's bringing out into the public space the idea that we have to be on board. No. Basically, I have two things to say about this. What's really frustrating when, like me, you're living this industrial experience and have been doing so for the last 15 minutes, you're absolutely convinced that we need, that all the countries are in agreement, we have to make this transition. And yet in France, we're writing a doctrine to say that it might be of interest, and we put very complicated systems in place to be able to do it. Meanwhile, we don't actually do anything. And I think there's one thing that's very, very simple. Last year, in 2022, France was the only country in Europe and one of the rare countries in the world to have set up for solar less solar provision than the previous year. And 2022 was the worst crisis year in terms of the climate. When the house is burning, we just do a little bit less. And then, this is a crazy process. At the time we're talking, in 2023, this was intended to be the best year for solar. But once again, our Italian friends have just connected. There are more 4 gigawatts connected in Italy. They'll be at 4.5. So we're lagging behind, and we're continuing to add layers to the onion and the administrative onion. So in Canada, for instance, you have a logger, for example, a lumberjack, and saying, it's going to be a cold winter, and he says to the Indian, the winter's going to be very, very cold, very, very cold. He goes back and forth and stocks up on wood. But then the Indian said, how do you know if it's going to be a cold year? And he said, well, when a white guy goes and brings wood in, it's going to be a cold winter. And if we just did renewables, so a question for you, François VERSINI, before we have a look at other people's point of view about this, people who are working actually directly in the terrain. Can we continue to build projects outside acceleration areas? I think legally these are not exclusive zones, areas. Even if for solar, we might ask ourselves the question, we've got agrivoltaism, which is going to be using a reference document which is exclusive. So these are going to be acceleration areas, but it's a different way of going about it. This is a bottom-up system with the Chamber of Agriculture being very instrumental in the process. I think that the wind turbines are going to be the essential devices used. Legally, my answer would be no, but the question that's going to be raised is, in practical terms, do I continue to carry out projects next to an acceleration area? And it doesn't this is the message that we had previously, whereby legally, if you had a project, there was nothing to stop you from setting up next to an acceleration area. So, but there has to be a motive, either from a landscape point of view or from another point of view. And I think the bottom-up process means that we have to define a zone where it would be desirable to have renewable structures. Nevertheless, legally, there is no absolute, it's not compulsory. So the government, this was something that started to go awry at parliamentary level. It's the legislators and the parliament who has to hand over power to the local authorities. I think this acceleration area law is the result, and we're all responsible for this, is the result of the fact that our government has not got a majority, and the fact that we have a National Assembly which is very mixed. And so this is the result of concessions to the right, to the left, with the ecologists, the socialists, the MP group, NUPES, and all the different political parties. Ultimately, this gives us a patchwork, which is a patchwork. So, Jean-Claude Posse, you are a mayor, you're a pioneer of renewables. What's your take on this law and these acceleration areas, or the way it's presented by the Parliament? There's a request on the part of the elected representatives for this to be applied upstream. Yes, good morning, everybody. Yes, in fact, been working as an elected representative for the last 23 years, and particularly on the renewable side. And this means that I don't necessarily agree with everything that's been said. First of all, the idea of the way of approaching renewables is such that we wanted to start as rural mayors, for example. We had 88% of the French territory, according to the statistics organizations. We wanted to change things by making proposals to the government. I discussed with the various cabinet ministers and to really emphasize the importance of it no longer being top-down, but the movement, the drive would come from the local communities, the local populations saying, okay, I want such and such to happen for a PV farm or other. And this is a radical change. And you can. And today, our municipalities are much better able to discuss and to accept, because I received all these developers who came along. They wanted to see the mayor, and they said, okay, so there's going to be such and such an advantage for the municipality. We have to do this. The mayor would then try and arrange the budget, and particularly in an area where the budget wasn't very high, and so people then suddenly discovered that there were going to be 15 wind turbines around their community, and so as part of the Mayor's Association, we said, okay, let's start by describing, making the situation known to the local community. This meant that the pill was easier to swallow. So in doing, as part of this process, we go out and see the population, we look for developer partners, institutions that are associated, and we discuss all this with our population. This is the main change in the process, and this is why I'm much more optimistic in relation to the possibility of developing these renewables in our territory. So we'll be talking about the actual setting up in a few minutes, but I'd like to talk to Daniel OUSTRAIN as a developer. When you come along for these acceleration, is it a constraint? Is it an opportunity as you see it?
Hello, everyone. I have a lot of things to say, and I'm wedged between Mr. PONS and Mr. DAVAL. I don't want to go back on the words because my function itself is I'm in charge of territorial consultation, but what I really do is I support territories and regions, and I try to make a difference between the expertise from the developers and the collectivities. How do we present a project that has a meaning for the regions? And the question that we should ask ourselves today is not how we accelerate, but why we should accelerate on regions. If you want us to accelerate, we should first understand, and when I say we, is the majority of the population and the elected officials and the technicians and also some people in certain departments, for what reason do we need renewables? What are they for? Of course, we need to produce electricity to replace fossil fuels. Okay, granted. But this is a transition that we're looking for. These projects, do we just want a foreign body that we install, that we integrate into a region, or can it be a lever for regional development? If we can start like this, that could be interesting. How can we do it? We have the acceleration areas coming up. I agree with Xavier DAVAL. For the developers, this is a bit scary because I used to be also close to the regions, and when you've worked 3-4 years on ADs and all of that is thrown into the bin, you kind of get, a bit skeptical, and you worry that it's going to happen again. What you mean is that the acceleration areas could be also ditched if there's for the new government. Well, the bottom line of this planning, and I'm going to talk about the areas Natura 2000. For those of you who followed it in regions, the way it was presented to us, as a constraint and not as a benefit for the regions. And since then, Natura 2000 is viewed as a protection area, a tool, but that is imposed on people. So I want to go back on the word consultation. We asked communes to identify some areas with the technical skills that are necessary, engineers who work on it. So we asked mayors then. Some of them don't really really know about these topics, and they have a lot going on a commune, as you know. You have a commune of 250,000 people. We asked them to do a zoning program by December, and in order to do this zoning program, they have to use skills that they don't necessarily have. So on top of that, we asked them to do a consultation process. And what we see happening is consultation of the public from 15th December to the 30th of December to give your opinion via an online tool on maps where you're being told that you're going to accelerate renewables in the region, and people have never heard about it. So what we're expecting is probably to resist, or for us to really roll up our sleeves to explain to people what we're having these renewables, what are they for. And I think that's one of the biggest problem with this ADER. These ZEDR are the acceleration areas. Sorry, we're very fond of acronyms in France. So, Mr. Pons, how do you implement those acceleration areas? How are towns reacting to that? It's difficult for us for the reason that were explained before, because a lot of tools that were promised by the state were not in place. They were very confusing. Some application decrees have just been released now, and there's still some tools that are very important and that we haven't mentioned yet. Like, for example, the mechanism for the PPAs, the power purchase agreement, that are not explicit enough at the moment to be implemented at the level of our communes. So there's a bit of a confusion. For example, for myself, I'm acting as a VIP. No, sorry, I'm acting as a salesperson. I'm trying to sell and validate and animate this law for the communes that are interested, and I could see that there are a lot of questions that are being asked. So it's going to take much longer than the time that was allowed to us by the government. When you say PPA, you mean the electricity that is delivered directly to the communes? No, I'm talking about the possibility to make a contract over time with some volumes of energy and tariff rates, because the law is offering a lot of interesting things for communes and the population. It offers the possibility to do so, to have your own consumption, that you can negotiate when the project is put together. It also gives the opportunity to belong to a fund for all the projects that were going to be redistributed with the communal budgets. So there's a direct, they're taking directly in count the needs of the populations. And if the commune does its job well, with all these PPA mechanisms and these auto-consumption mechanisms, and also through the mechanisms that are in the law to take a share at the level of the region, it could be really interesting for the residents. Yes, Xavier. I spend a lot of my time in rural areas in Burgundy, in a small commune of 254 people, and I did what I had to do, being passionate of renewables and very motivated. I organized a conference, and I had all the mayors of the region who came, and I could tell and I could see the gap, the level of knowledge. These small communes are not prepared for it. So it's not because from the top, the people are asking you to map out and create some areas. They don't know anything about it. So I spent some of my free time, and I tried to explain as well as I could in a neutral way what can happen and what opportunities can we expect to turn it into something positive. So I hear you, Mr. Pons, on what you said about a PPA. This is my jobs, and I've been doing it for quite a while. So financial engineering, technical engineering, our jobs are extremely complicated. It's not because all of a sudden now, it is up to the communes to do the development. Our companies and our trade unions did some development. It's not just knocking on the door and saying, oh, well, maybe we'll take a piece of land and try to do something there. You have to analyze the grid, you have to analyze the setup for the wind farms or the solar plants. The ground, the soil is only one of the components. It's a real job behind it. And it was a lot of financial analysis to do as well. If I can't finance it, I won't be able to do the work. So it's all linked. So what we're saying, it involves jobs that are extremely technical and complex. And I am very happy, and the more empowerment there will be, the better it will be. These communes and these farmers' associations will be invited at the table. But we have a lot to share because we have the technical skills, because it's our jobs, and you, on your end, you need to be capable to get on board. You can't just use it as a consumer. Julie Ferry, on the implementation side, do we know how many communes there are which are lined up to elaborate those acceleration areas? And how is it happening? So it's hard to tell. The survey came out for all the communes of France, probably with this number of 30% of the communes. Clearly, we're very surprised by the number. The minister thinks that it's a wrong number, but we're surprised. So I'd like to answer to Mr. Pons. Lately, we have well, I would like to tell you what is the AMORCE association is about. It carries the voice of the collectivities, so there are entities that inform the collectivities and act as an intermediary between the development and the institutions, and it's very important. And among, we have over 1,000 members, and a lot of them are regions. It goes from from the small town, to the region. So we have the whole range of collectivities. What about the trade unions of Énergies? Do they do the job as well? Are they going out and explaining about renewables to the communes? We have some members who are energy syndicates who understand the topic, with some the creation of a mixed company. We have some people who act as ambassadors and who try to inspire others. So our idea is to create a network and to talk to the elected officials about other elected officials so they can pass around all the information. So we organize regularly what we call webinars. These are remote, webinars online, so people can present their projects and their feedback, and we can see that most of the people answer during our webinars. They say that they're not following the deadline. They're not complying with the deadline. So we can also talk about the timeline, because among the people who answer, they're asked, when do you think you're going to turn in your answer? And we can see that it's going to happen mostly through the first quarter or the second quarter of 2024, which shows that some elected officials are really jumping in, and we encourage them to really learn and find out more and about the renewables. And we can see clearly that in terms of deadline, they need additional deadline, and it had to be anticipated. So you're mayor, so how did you manage to create your acceleration area? Well, first of all, we tried to think about within the municipal council to see if the council agreed to start something, an action, and then the council agreed. We identified and mapped out the areas within the communes that we could potentially use. You already knew the potential of renewables in your territory? No. But it's not what the law is asking us to do. The law is asking us to give plots of land, and that's what they're asking. So, and then we had some public meetings, and we put in place a system of Q&A on the website of the commune, so we could answer the questions that the people were asking themselves, which are very often questions that you don't think about when it's your job. But the people who are not, this would come to their minds. Do you have an example? Oh, for example, yes. On spring waters, if I was told that if we have too many PVs, it's going to prevent the spring waters to renew themselves. So we explained to them that the water is going to run over the PVs and it's not going to stop the spring. And I paid an hydrologist who came for half a day, and he explained the mechanism and he said that there would be no damage created to the springs in the village. So when you map out those areas, those plots of land, you don't dedicate them to one source of energy or another. It could be a PV park, it could be a wind park, it could be any... No, we don't. The idea of the law is I raise my hand and I say I am willing, with my population, to host this project and to negotiate, of course. It doesn't mean that that because you raise your hand, you're going to have to accept anything that is dictated by the developer. It's a way of saying, we have we can, open up our land to the project. Daniel OUSTRAIN, I think that what you're saying is needs to be thought about for the plots by typology of energy. At Total Energy Renouvelable, it is a company that is multi-energy. We work on development and maintenance. And as Monsieur DAVAL said, there's a lot of jobs behind it for the financing. It's a very complicated job. And it's a very complicated profession. But this crossing of the technical side and knowing the land, like you say, knowing where the spring is, etc., or the local challenges, are we going to lose some business in the region because we're going to have a wind park? What's going to happen with the biodiversity, etc.? There are a lot of thinking to be done on the ground versus, regarding the local uses. For example, I'm going to talk to you about a region where the project leaders came and they didn't see the specificity of that region, of that land. So it needs to be known to decide if it's relevant here to put some PV panels or something else. Methane production, if you have a village of 200 people, it's like the wind farm. You don't, it's not enough, it's not big enough. So what I want to say is there's a misunderstanding of the point of doing this zoning process, and the towns who decided to go ahead with it. We could see some projects that are happening with but there's really a gap between the technical skill and the local knowledge, and that's why we need to build a relationship of trust that hasn't happened, or at least not for everyone, because there's a lot of skepticism and a lot of reluctance from the users. But that's how we should accelerate. Really, is how do we build synergies so we can find opportunities. For now, these acceleration areas. When you say we're at 30%, I am on the ground 3 or 4 days a week, and I can tell you on the places that we have projects, I can count them for now. And I don't know where you're taking the 30% from, because it's very, very little numbers. No, it's a survey, Intercommunalité de France, and that is a federation, and they did this survey and they came up with this number, but that surprised ourselves. So our members, clearly, when we ask them and we talk to them, because every day we have them on the phone as well, we're not there yet, so clearly, with this number. François VERSINI-CAMPINCHI, yeah, I'd like to answer to what Mr. PONS said. There's some interesting opportunities and from this law. but that implies that the elected officials take it, harness it. You know, we have a lot of communes. The meshing is going to be huge, and there are going to be huge gaps between different regions and different areas. So a local authority that would actually take it upon himself and talk to developers, how many are going to just not going to do it and not going to be interested, and how many of those are going to create those acceleration areas? I don't know. There'll be some exclusion areas. If we have an acceleration area, how much feedback do I get from the developers who say they're only motivated so they can do an exclusion area next to it? So, for example, I don't want any wind farm on my whole commune. But you can only do that if you have an acceleration area on the side. I think it's even more complicated than that. It's more twisted than that. There's those who are motivated and they want to move along, and those who do, they think about it and they propose something concretely. And there's a framework. But there's the collectivities that are completely lost. We know that. What are we doing? How do we do it? I have other stuff, going on. I have social problems I have to manage, and we have some communes that were not motivated to begin with, that didn't want anything to do with it PV, wind turbines. I received a letter from a commune. I won't quote him. I won't say who it is. He said, "I don't want any renewables on my commune." So this is clear. We know that there's some people who really don't want it, and we can understand it because we don't. But if you don't want it, the best way to do it is to not to have exclusion areas, but to do a zoning and then choosing. In our commune, we're going to do everything on the roofs of public buildings. So we have a zoning that is specified for that. So maybe the local committees will say it's not enough because we know that you have these other areas that would be available for it. But we have zoning for land that is going to be dedicated to PV panels, for example. But if we zone a particular type of energy, it's going to allow us to say, okay, we're making an effort on this part. We don't need to let us be on the other side. So the idea would be how the collective committees are going to harness it. And in terms of acceptability, I'm not sure that will advance the thinking process within the communes. I'm not sure we understand what are those territorial councils, what are their role. So it was introduced before the acceleration, the regional committees for energy. One committee is created by region to promote consultation, and it's to make the goals regional and to ask them for their feedback on the acceleration law. So if their opinion shows that the areas are not enough, we go back to the communes to try to map it out again. But I'd like to highlight the idea of information with the regions and the territories. And what we retain from this mapping process is the data are not always readable because we have mayors that are very involved and who do a very good job with that kind of tool, but we have a majority of them who they don't have the right resources, they don't have financial resources to do it, they don't have the engineering resources. So we've developed another tool to complement it. The idea is not to create thousands of tools, but it's to bring the information and the education to a mayor who wants to work on it, on renewables, and he doesn't know how to get around it. So how does this tool work? So do you have a slide of this tool? The tool, its name, we had a brainstorming, it's not very original. We called it Excel ENR. It's an Excel format spreadsheet for now. Maybe the format will change. For now, we've developed this Excel sheet, and the data is you need to have your INSEE code. So by entering this code, of the commune, the administrative code, we would say, is what is the consumption of energy of my commune? So that's the basic information that not all the elected officials have, and the tool centralizes a number of databases. So this is first level information. The second level of information is what is currently my production of renewables on my territory. So that crosses both information. And instead of speaking about it for too long, I think it would be just interesting to launch. We have launched a tutorial on how to use this tool. So what I suggest is maybe we can show you this little video. It will be more explicit. It's a 3-minute video. Okay.
Avec le petit logo.
Alors peut-être le son, effectivement. Ouais.
Bonjour et bienvenue. L'association AMORCE vous présente Accélère, un outil Excel permettant aux communes de s'emparer du destin énergétique de leur territoire et de réaliser un dimensionnement cohérent de leur zone d'accélération des ENR. Les communes peuvent simplement, en rentrant leur code INSEE dans la zone en bleu, identifier facilement le portrait énergétique de leur territoire avec les onglets bleus, consommation et production et ordre de grandeur, et réaliser une documentation du potentiel de production d'énergie renouvelable à l'aide des onglets rouges. L'onglet consommation et production vous permet d'afficher facilement le bilan des consommations d'énergie locale, ainsi qu'en parallèle la production locale d'énergie renouvelable sur l'année 2021. Ensuite, l'onglet ordre de grandeur vous permet de vous poser la question: quelles sont les différentes typologies d'installations d'énergie renouvelable à mettre en place sur mon territoire pour atteindre 10, 20, 30, 40, 50% des consommations d'énergie produites localement par des installations de production d'énergie renouvelable. Cet onglet vous permet, à l'aide d'ordre de grandeur, de pouvoir simuler un mix énergétique sur votre territoire à l'aide de 3 filières énergétiques: l'électricité, le gaz et la chaleur. Ensuite, les 3 onglets rouges vous permettent de traduire le travail réalisé dans le cadre des zones d'accélération des ENR en potentiel de production d'énergie renouvelable sur votre commune. L'onglet ENR électrique vous permet de traduire des surfaces mobilisables sur votre commune en potentiel de production d'énergie renouvelable annuelle. Pour le cas du solaire photovoltaïque en toiture, au sol, en ombrière ou pour l'éolien terrestre. Ensuite, l'onglet méthanisation vous permet, à l'aide d'exemples, de vous représenter à quoi pourrait correspondre une unité de méthanisation sur mon territoire en fonction de mes enjeux locaux ainsi que de ma volonté politique. Enfin, dans l'onglet chaleur renouvelable, vous retrouverez un rappel des différentes typologies d'énergie renouvelable thermique utilisables afin de produire de la chaleur renouvelable. Ensuite, l'onglet chaleur renouvelable vous permet d'estimer quelle est la capacité de la commune à consommer localement cette chaleur renouvelable à l'aide de réseaux de chaleur ou, dans le cas de changement de mode de chauffage vers des ENR thermiques, de bâtiments tertiaires ou de bâtiments résidentiels. Pour vous aider dans la réalisation de ce travail, vous y retrouverez des éléments d'information sur votre commune, ainsi que des exemples de réseaux de chaleur dans les territoires, et enfin, des outils pour pouvoir estimer les besoins de chaleur de votre territoire. Enfin, l'onglet bilan vous permet de réaliser un bilan des consommations énergétiques actuelles, un bilan des productions locales d'énergie renouvelable, ainsi qu'un bilan du potentiel de déploiement d'énergie renouvelable sur la commune. Il permet enfin de recontextualiser la situation de chaque commune par rapport aux directives nationales et européennes en matière de production d'énergie renouvelable, ainsi que de sobriété et d'efficacité énergétique. Vous pouvez télécharger Accélère directement sur le site damorce.asso.fr ainsi que retrouver dans la page sommaire de la publication un tutoriel plus complet. Merci de nous avoir suivis.
Merci pour ce film.
Thank you for this movie. Are you done on the topic? No, I wanted to say that the acceleration area are not for wind turbines, and even if it's something we're interested in, we're looking at all sectors, and that's what we want to put forward. And I'm more interested in the electric but we have a big team on renewables. So before we give the floor to the audience, Jean-Claude Ponce, what is the atmosphere within the associations or Mayor of France towards wind turbines? Are we really against it, or some people, is it more like a mixed reaction? No, once more, it's a matter of skill and it's a matter of method. If you take a village of 150 inhabitants and you put 50 wind turbines around it, everybody's going to react to it. So there's a question of size and scale when you propose a project. And there's also a matter of method. Once more, you need to co-build a project like this. If the mayor agrees with the idea of having wind turbines in his village, he has to be able to share with his population, with the developers, with the institutions, with the nearby communes, what we're doing at our level of our village. We're trying to have a community of energy transition with the other nearby villages in order to have to pool our resources and to have a number of partners that are, that are consistent. And if we manage to do this work, this work of animation at the level of our region, the projects will be, there's a high potential of acceptability. There will always be people who are against, but we will manage to convince some of the skeptics within the population. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to give you the floor, and I think we're going to close on those acceleration areas. Do you have any questions for our guests on the topic? Please don't feel free to jump in.
Thibault Le Secteur, I'm an operator developer, and I think it's very interesting to hear what you have to say, whether we're talking about syndicates, about the town hall policy. Overall, what we are seeing today is a lot of projects, particularly PV projects. We don't do wind turbines. A lot of projects that work very well in consultation with the local authorities and towns. But the mayor then sets up a lot of things in place to help to integrate the local authority and citizens in the design of the project. And as has been said, there are a lot of places where the town halls simply don't have the necessary skills and competence to do this. And at a certain point, by wanting to accelerate, we raise the level, in fact, and how can we, in terms of the way we set up a project, and with much more complex solutions at hand, it's difficult to convince the local authorities, where you have the different departmental references, etc. Things get very complicated. And at a certain point, one mayor said to me, I'm just not consulting my computer any longer about this. I've just stopped. And how can we make sure that we can make sure that we do support people? There are a lot of people who have been working for years and years, who've called for tenders, etc., have worked out specifications, but there are others who have never really been able to relate to the project in this way, and saying people often don't want to get involved. And we try and say to them, no, you're the ones who are responsible. You have to give your opinion, and ultimately you're the ones who have to accept the project. In actual fact, there are a lot of places where the subject hasn't been dealt with properly, and where in fact I think the local population has been irritated more than anything else. Yes, I completely agree. We've been promised a lot on the part of the government, not only from a technical point of view, but also in terms of the support in the field. I follow the local region through our association, and whether it's the prefecture or the DTM or the electrification syndicates, some of them are motivated and they're doing great work in the field of training people or informing people, and others, I won't give any names, but they say, okay, so this thing exists, and they don't go any further in trying to inform the local authorities. And I think it's at ministry level, they're planning a major wave of acceleration zones, but when it actually arrives in the field, it's a tiny ripple that actually operates at local level. We have a PCAT which is active, for example. The people leading this do the necessary work, go out and meet the mayors, but ultimately it's at territory level that things are going to be worked out, depending on the opportunities and the attitudes of certain PCRT plans for the climate, air, energy and territory. So, Julie Ferry, did you want to add something to that? Yeah, I think perhaps to add something, I think that when we look at the local rural communities, there isn't the technical engineering skill locally available. And so just perhaps to remind you, I don't know whether in the audience today everybody knows this. Let me just get the right slide up. Yeah, that's the one. So the ADEME was talking about local technical support. These are called generators. At the moment, there are 13 different regions in France and abroad. And these are advisors who are already present in local structures like energy syndicates, associations or other bodies, the idea being that these advisors give the first level of information which can be obtained freely from the commune or the municipality to raise the awareness of the local population. And a developer will come to the territory to find out, to give more information, provide the necessary tools to have the possibility of truly understanding what the developers have to say and to move forward. We animate, we lead this network, and what's important here is to really link this to the local level and the actual plot. We have 9 metropolitan regions. There's an internet site where the municipality can look for the contact, the name of the contact person, call them, and ask them to come to the commune, to the municipality. And this is something, this engineering side has to be developed, not only on a technical basis, but also within the local municipalities. Would anybody else like to ask a question? If I could just, okay, there'll be one more question, and that will be the last. Yes, I'm sorry. I hope my question will be clear, but we're a small company. We produce energy, and we're installing our first solar farm with 250 kilowatts. It's small. When we talk about the developers here and the people who buy electricity, we can see that they're not used to such small projects. But we work in a very small village with 200 people. It was accepted because it was took place on a plot which was hidden from view by the neighbors. And my question is whether these acceleration areas will take into consideration these small projects, which are perhaps more easily accepted by local authorities or small municipalities. Why in France don't we encourage these small projects? It's great to have great megawatt producing installations, but there are some places where we can't really work on that scale. And there's places where there's nothing at all. And why don't we encourage these small projects, which I think are essential today? Julie Ferry, perhaps you'd like to answer, or perhaps François or Xavier. So this is a ground. This is on the ground. So this is the blind spot. A small plant on the ground-based plant is the area which is perhaps where there isn't less administrative coverage. There's supposed to be a ground tariff which is coming up. I can see that Xavier doesn't reckon this will actually happen. This has been pending for the last 2 years. We don't know when this will actually be determined. We're supposed to have a support mechanism, but I'll let Xavier add on that point. But administratively speaking, things are getting better. For the acceleration areas, just to answer your question, the acceleration area is based, starts on the commune level and goes up to the departmental level. There is the will to plan on a territorial basis and be able to adapt to micro projects. And let me remind you that France is the only country that didn't respect its 2020 objectives, its goals. So I'm not sure that these projects are part of the solution. Absolutely, they're adapted to the local level, but the mechanism of the acceleration area wouldn't necessarily include them. Xavier? Welcome to France. So we're a country of paradoxes. We're a country where the government wants to look after everything, and because of that, they prefer dealing with big projects because it's already incapable of dealing with big projects. I can't imagine what it would be like if they dealt with little projects. And so this is an entire paradox. Lots of announcements are made. 2 years ago, we were talking about small renewable energy plant tariffs. 2 years ago, we haven't even applied the S22, which is the vintage year. You can see, well, maybe it's going to be called S24. So I don't know what really to answer here. There's a lot of ambition, lots of will, but when everything has to be actually regulated, nothing actually happens. These tariffs are regularly delayed. There's always 3 months delay. But I was talking about your application, which is great and well done. Thank you very much, because you can see the tool that the state wants to invent, and you have to be very high-level administrative experts to understand them. But there is, in my commune, the town hall doesn't have a laptop. And so, or didn't have a computer. So we have people who are prepared to be elected. And thank you to all these people in these small communes who take on the responsibility without the resources to do this. You have a municipal council, just to give you, and if you want to raise money for the community, somebody will come along with their computer and connect it, and that's how things actually happen. They don't connect up to a state-run system. In real life, this is what happens. And as I was saying, as an aside, you are only using data from 2021 when you're working with an industry of more than 30% per year. What's the point of having 2021 data for the little communities? Even our French system means that we can't even get it together to get data. And so when they're very good at counting when it comes to taxes, they can do it in real time and get right to the source. But when it's about, for example, if we're in an acceleration phase, have you accelerated in a car? And you do it without looking at the dashboard and without the other tools, with your eyes closed, look what happens. Daniel Lestrade, you wanted to say something? Yes, I think it's pretty symptomatic, what's just been said in terms of targeting the 250 kilowatts necessary. Like the bigger projects, we have 3 levels to think at. The first level is provided by the ADE at the moment, the acceleration areas, where we're asking elected representatives what kind of energy. Oh, I want this, I want that. So here we're going to be making choices. I want a little project because I like little projects. I want a big project. And we have a vision which stops at the technology level with possibly a vision. And there's another level which is interesting, which communes like yours have chosen, which is positive energy, where they start thinking about an energy mix. We're looking at what we need in the area and how we're going to be able to link in with other territories to have a real energy mix, and how we're going to be working beyond production, frugality, energy frugality, etc. But we remain focused on a transition and energy transition position, but on a wider level. The third level, which is much rarer, a few joint communes work on this basis, where we think about energy transition, but this part of a real territorial project with local priority areas saying, okay, we have to produce, it's going to have impacts. We work on projects, small and large. We work on roofs, for example, regardless of the surface area. So public or private. And the people who are carrying this type of project saying they know that it's going to have an impact. It's an industrial project. But how is this project used as a lever to put everything in terms of resilience in a territory? And this is where we start talking about short circuits, questions related to cultural heritage, etc. We talk about climate change, but the main issue is related to the loss of biodiversity. So we can't get the aim is that in our territories we have a livable future, and with this with these accelerated areas, this is not the case. I think there's a lack of IT equipment, which can be really decisive. This approach, like the generator network, is something which can come in to alleviate the situation. People go to public meetings. But obviously, you need to make available the IT equipment for the local community so that they're able to take advantage of the information available. There are missions available to raise the awareness in terms of planning and the need for planning, and also a link like portals or other priming tools to help the elected representative to accelerate the project. What we also look at is the inter-commune possibilities. A commune is, if it works on that scale, this is where they're going to have more technical resources available. So these are the 2 points which are important. What's lacking in the law today is being able to put this, making all this available. 2 last questions, short questions, please, so that I have 2 questions myself. So the gentleman over here, and then another question from the other part of the room. Hello. Yeah, we can hear you. So, hello, thank you for all the speakers. I think we all share the concern of finding the right kind of balance or a compromise between existing constraints and the possible solutions for renewables. I'd like to benefit from what the mayor just said. I'm a passionate, I'm very fervent about energy renewables, and a lot of aerodromes in France are abandoned, and this represents it's a burden for the local budget because it's considered it's a public domain. But these aerodromes are oriented depending on the direction of the wind, and it might be an idea to convert these into wind turbine production areas. So they belong to the state. There will be no resistance from the population because they are used to seeing a kind of aerodrome or a control tower or aircraft hangars. And so why not reconvert these? Because they're already they're ready in geological or geographic terms, ready to be transformed into production sites for renewables, for wind turbines. So it's up to you to look at this as a possibility and think about it in the near future or in the midterm. Thank you very much, Mr. Pons. So there are several communes. There's Lézignan is a little town that's been working on this already. Beyond the aerodromes, there are lots of abandoned areas on the coast, for instance. There are a lot of areas which are abandoned, and it's they're more flexible about the constraints in terms of how these areas can be used. In the rural area, we have a lot of waste areas or quarries, for example, that are no longer used, which corresponds to what you were saying, what people were saying earlier about small renewable farms. And I think this needs to be encouraged before using natural areas or even less farming areas. Thank you. Also taking into consideration the ecological interest, if we look at a quarry, for example, you'll see lizards, for example, rare species, and so we can't work on these sites very often. It's not because it's a degraded site that it isn't rich in ecological terms. Thank you very much for that detail. The gentleman at the back. Yes, just to look at these degraded zones. I'm living in a citizens cooperative. We were looking at a project for 80 roofs to produce energy on human habitation areas. So at the moment we're working with 50 members. And we're hoping that we're going to be able to meet the timeline, but it's very difficult. There are people with different skills and competencies, but it's very difficult to really meet all the requirements. Could you just ask the actual question? Our small-scale production needs to be stimulated with technical input or administrative input. We're not working on a large scale, but on a small scale, we need to know how to go about doing things on a small scale, which are often much better accepted by the local community. Would somebody like to come back on this one? Yeah, just to what you think, we have the Occitanie region. If the Occitanie region will support your project, and once again, it's not because it's a citizen project that we have to be 100% citizen-based. You can look at banks, look at expert information from outside. I think once again, it's a synergy which we need to look for. Otherwise, we can't move forward. Mr. Pons? Yes, we set off with a small farm, 250 kilowatts, and we're now working with the regional national park of the Corbière, which has made a call for proposals for all the roofs in the common buildings, schools, etc., with PV panels. I think you have to absolutely encourage this kind of thing. We need the necessary engineering input. It's complicated. In the context of the park, we had a call for tender. We had a selection process, and we chose the person to do so. And I think in your case, it would be a good idea if you continue this project to have the right kind of technical framework, the financial framework, which makes it possible for you to complete your project. I had a couple of questions. I want to zoom out to the national level here. The climate, the COP28 has already expressed its strategy. I would like to have your view on this. Something surprised me. I read it when I got to Montpellier. I was looking for a figure for 2030 of the percentage of renewable energy in our mix, because as you know, the 32%, I think, in the text. It's not actually written in the text. So, just to explain my question, there was a European directive which is called Renewable Energy Directive, which imposes 42.5% of renewables in the mix by 2030, which is not very far away. And I couldn't find that figure in the climate energy strategy. And how is it going to be fixing to this target? You won't find the figure because they don't want to communicate it. I'm not going to open up the nuclear versus renewable debate, but that's where the issue lies. As far as the government's concerned, there are people who consider that France has already done the work in terms of CO2 emissions, and that they can free themselves of it from European commitments as a result. Julie Ferry, would you comment on this lacking figure in the strategy? document? Yeah, it's lacking, but or it's absent. But on the territory side, we've set out a scenario of a multi-annual energy program. Yep, I'll set the slides for you. I'll change the slides. So a reminder of the associations which have joined us to set up this scenario. We're looking at 45%. So the idea is to have a scenario that's compatible with carbon neutrality in 2050, with a point at 2035. And the idea was that we were in the process of developing the multi-annual energy program. At territory level. In this strategy and this roadmap that was published recently by the ministry, we have two distinct topics. There's the section related to consumption, where the ministry is looking at heat pumps, for example, based on frugality. That's the starting point, in actual fact. But the state said that they've been saying since 2022 that we have to be more frugal. But it's not that clear. We can't launch into heat pumps without having an idea of the envelope. The other aspect is to is working at PV parks on the ground, putting wind turbines offshore, which is developing very fast. We're looking at the idea of diffuse development or different working with small projects. This is something which is sustained by this scenario. We're looking at shared governance. We're aware that certain territories are not at the same thinking level yet, but this is an approach that we do encourage. With the idea of the development of on land wind turbines. So the idea being to obtain the right figures, but to do things in a cohesive way, in a virtuous way, with the right kind of practices. So when we talk about renewable energy at AMORCE, we also talk about heat, renewable heat, which can then be possibly transformed. But we're not looking at electricity. We're looking at all renewables. It's very ambitious. I just wanted to make a little point in terms of electric energy. 100% support the idea that we have to remain frugal. Today we're delighted because we consume less. The energy collection has dropped by 9%. But this 9% is not about frugality. It's an industrial catastrophe. The cost of energy has made a lot of companies go bankrupt. And so we also have to make sure that our economy is functioning properly. It's not just about saying, okay, we've got Excel curves that shows that it's working. There are realities. There's a reality there in the sense that companies are dying. So basically, do you agree with this idea of the objectives of the PPE or for the sectors that you're working in? We are both electricity and heat related for your renewables. We've been really pushing for renewable heat, for example, and rather than focusing entirely on electricity. There's a lot to be done, and we're optimistic about this because we get the feeling, having looked at the strategy of the RTE, or the planning, the RTE planning, and the state planning, which is beginning to be aligned. And we're starting to think, raise our eyes to the right kind of horizon. But we're convinced that ultimately we have to hang on to this process and drive renewable energies in every respect between wind turbines, solar energy. We have to link this as much as possible to make sure that all the sources are available. If we can use primary energy to use heat, we should get it as close as possible to the source rather than going via electricity. Maybe you'd like to add in here. So when we talk about energy in France, it's always amazed me that we only think in terms of electricity. We consume gas, we consume wood, which is a renewable, but which isn't often properly used. We consume oil as well. For heating, yes, it's important to differentiate. The government tends to look at overall electrification, whereas we are looking at heating, for example. Renewable energy has its role to play. And on this subject, in terms of heating production, we have to have a heating network. This is an area that we are really discussing and raising awareness over with the people, with our members. Any commune of over 5,000 inhabitants can have a heat network installed on its territory. The French state has missed the targets, and normally speaking, they would have to be paying a fine in Brussels. And ultimately, we're saying we don't need to pay this fine because we're doing well as far as CO2 is concerned. What do you think about France's position, which gives itself renewable targets and then changes course? I think around 42% is we're about 20% of renewables, all renewables in France at the moment, which means we have to double this in 7 years. It's huge. There are certain countries which are up and running, but France, if we miss the objective for 2030, we're going to get another fine, which we'll refuse to pay. This will be part of the endless disputes in the European Union with the French argument of problem of non-respect, of non-compliance. The wind turbines involve the National Action Plan. Every year these plans come out, and the argument is always, well, we've helped to bring out more wind turbines. We've divided the rates, electricity rates, by 3. So this is the kind of discourse that they present. So, the left hand doesn't really know what the right hand's doing. So in terms of payment, it will end up being paid ultimately. But for time being, it's people are being completely silent about it. Well, meanwhile, people are saying we're being virtuous, and so we're not going to pay. So, having made the effort on decarbonization and the nuclear, so it's nothing new. This was started well beyond the directive was established. What really amazes me is that this objective that we haven't reached, it wasn't imposed. It was France in 29. So this is what we're going to do. And in front of all the European countries, they stated that's what we would do. And we didn't do it. And this is what we've missed, our own target. It's not something that came down from the sky that was imposed on us. It's an argument that we used. We were the country with the highest level of hydro. In terms of energy renewables, we were already pretty high. For electricity, we look at 33%. No. The target that we missed for 2021. No, these were earlier goals. I think the figure was something like 27%. 22%. And I think at the beginning we were looking at something like 15%. So in relation to other countries, the margin was much lower, and we didn't even manage to succeed in fulfilling our objectives. So once again, it's an objective. It was fixed. It's easy. It's easy for the people who criticize.
Why did we set ourselves this goal? The goal that we set for ourselves is something abstract. On the ground is why would we reach 42, 50, or whatever number. What matters for us, I believe, is what you said, Xavier, is we are taking the risk of an economic crisis if we don't have the energy at the right tariff, at the right rate. So this crisis that could be used to help us degrowth If we just have small projects with rates that are high in terms of selling back, because the installations entail a higher rate, we're going to have a cost of energy that is higher. That's going to entail people going bankrupt. That's going to entail people not being able to heat themselves properly, having difficulties. So why do we want this energy transition, and why is going to be the impact, social, energy, and economic impact? If we don't ask ourselves these questions, we're missing the goal. Mr. Pons, how do you feel about this bad mindset of France towards renewables? When we harnessed this question at the associations of the rural mayors of France, we launched what we called the big workshop. So we united about 100 mayors coming from all backgrounds, and we met in Paris. Because it's a center, and we try to think about this strange object that was energy transition. What is this thing? A strange thing for most of people who live in the country, whether they live in rural or urban areas. What does it mean in our everyday life? What is the narrative that explains all the actions that the law is trying to take? And I believe that we're missing an anthropologic dimension with sociological tools to do all this work of awareness for the population. And as long as we have debates on percentage and things like this, we won't make it. We won't get to this objective. We need to have a narrative that is exciting, that mobilizes the population, and then we will be able to get everybody on board, which is not the case today. The question of the percentage is not irrelevant, though, because when we measure the impact of Russian gas on the cost of gas, it was very relevant. It's a matter of sovereignty, energy independence. 45%. Some people wanted to have even more, and it's also an independence from gas and oil and gas. So on the regions, I believe that this type of argument can be heard. Well, when we started the work, the production work, because we have two wind parks, PV parks, we started with an energy diagnosis. We tried to figure out where the energy was going in the town. We realized that the classrooms were heated throughout the year because we didn't have a switch to turn off the heat. When I asked the teachers how did they do when it was too hot, they said, well, I just opened the window. So first of all, we did this energy performance diagnosis, and then we thought about it, and in our village we organized some outings with thermal cameras so people could realize that they were heating the outdoors. And there was even a debate among the people on these topics. So I think that we need to go back and to anchor this mutation, this change of paradigms. It's not said enough by our politicians. We should tell people what we're going to have to move towards. And our population is having a hard time because we need tools, the anthropologic tools, to try to ask the question again in the ecological debate and the anthropologic debate, to be able to share with the population. I fully, Jean-Claude, Mr. Mayor, congratulations. This is a real mayor. We need to make sense. We're a country of technicians and technocrats. We produce papers, we produce areas, everything remains very abstract. What matters is exactly what you said, why we're doing it, and why are we doing it together, and what society do we want to create, and let's look together towards the same horizon. And let's also think about the coming generation, because we're more intelligent than the rest of the world would produce some doctrines and that the rest of the world would envy us for. No, we have a real problem of the relationship between the human being and energy. We're consuming more and more energy. We don't want to go back to the Stone Age, so we need to think, how do we manage energy? How do we look at it? How do we harness it? to build it inside our societies. This is a phenomenon that is interesting for everyone. And as you said, it's about anthropology. How do we bring a meaning behind all that? François, you're going to have the last word. I've heard a lot of times last year people regretting that we didn't have any power breaks in the middle of the energy crisis. And in countries where you have 4 hours of breaks for a day, you realize that the wind park or the PV park that you install has a meaning. But unfortunately, an electric system is quite efficient, so we really hope now that there will be some breakage, so people realize that we need something else. Thank you very much, and I ask you to give our speakers a round of applause.
Donc écoutez, on verra bien si l'accélération se produit ou pas.
So we'll see if we have this acceleration happening or not, and we'll be here next year to assess where we're at. Thank you all. See you soon.